Jolie had always wondered about her grandmother, who had died when she was a baby. She had never met her, but she had heard stories about her from her mother, stories that made her shiver and doubt, stories that said her grandmother was a witch. She didn't believe in witches, of course. She was a rational, modern woman who had a successful career as a journalist. She had no time for superstitions and myths. She had no interest in her grandmother's legacy. Until she received a letter from a lawyer informing her that she had inherited her grandmother's house. A house she had never seen, in a town she had never visited. A house that was worth a fortune, according to the lawyer. She was curious and tempted. She decided to take a break from her hectic life and check out the house. Maybe she could sell it and make some money. Maybe she could learn something about her family history. Maybe she could find out the truth about her grandmother. She packed her bags and drove to the town, following the directions from the lawyer. The town was small and quaint, with a friendly atmosphere. She asked around for the house and got mixed reactions. Some people smiled and gave her directions. Some people frowned and warned her to stay away. Some people looked scared and refused to talk to her. She ignored them and followed the signs to the house. It was a huge old mansion, surrounded by a high fence and a thick forest. It looked abandoned and decrepit, with broken windows and peeling paint. It looked haunted and sinister, with dark shadows and eerie noises. It looked like a witch's house. She felt a chill run down her spine, but she shrugged it off. She was not afraid. She was curious. She parked her car and walked to the gate. It was locked, but she had the key. She opened it and entered the property. She walked to the front door. It was also locked, but she had another key. She opened it and stepped inside the house. She was greeted by a blast of cold air and a musty smell. She looked around and saw a large hall with a grand staircase and a chandelier. The hall was dusty and dirty, with cobwebs and rats. The hall was dark and gloomy, with flickering candles and portraits. The hall was creepy and unwelcoming, with strange symbols and objects. The hall was a witch's hall. She felt another chill run down her spine, but she shrugged it off. She was not afraid. She was curious. She walked to the staircase and climbed it. She wanted to see the rest of the house. She wanted to see her grandmother's room. She wanted to see her grandmother's secrets. She reached the second floor and saw a long corridor with many doors. She tried to open them, but they were all locked. She wondered what was behind them, but she had no keys. She walked to the end of the corridor and saw one door that was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and saw a dark room. She entered the room and saw a bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and a bookshelf. The room was dusty and dirty, with cobwebs and rats. The room was dark and gloomy, with flickering candles and portraits. The room was creepy and unwelcoming, with strange symbols and objects. The room was a witch's room. She felt a surge of fear run through her body, but she shrugged it off. She was not afraid. She was curious. She walked to the bed and saw a pillow, a blanket, and a doll. The pillow was stained and torn. The blanket was ragged and dirty. The doll was old and ugly. She picked up the doll and saw a note pinned to its chest. The note said, "Welcome, my dear granddaughter. I've been waiting for you. I have a gift for you. A gift of magic and power. A gift of blood and fire. A gift of love and hate. A gift of life and death. A gift of you and me. A gift of us. Open the wardrobe and see for yourself. Don't be afraid. Be curious. Be mine." She felt a shock of horror run through her veins, but she shrugged it off. She was not afraid. She was curious. She walked to the wardrobe and opened it. She saw a mirror, a robe, a hat, and a broom. The mirror was cracked and dirty. The robe was black and red. The hat was pointed and wide. The broom was wooden and old. She saw herself in the mirror, wearing the robe and the hat, holding the broom. She saw her grandmother in the mirror, smiling and laughing, hugging and kissing her. She saw a witch in the mirror. She saw herself as a witch. She felt a burst of pain run through her heart, but she shrugged it off. She was not afraid. She was curious. She was a witch. She was her grandmother's granddaughter. She was her grandmother's gift. She was her grandmother's plan. She smiled and laughed. She hugged and kissed the mirror. She grabbed the broom and flew out of the window. She flew to the town and set it on fire. She flew to the world and spread her magic. She flew to the sky and became a star. She was happy. She was powerful. She was evil. She was a witch. I was driving home from a long day at work, feeling tired and bored. The road was dark and empty, except for the occasional headlights of other cars passing by. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, but all I could find was some static and a faint voice that sounded like a news report. Police are still searching for the escaped convict, who is considered armed and dangerous. He is described as a tall, muscular man with a shaved head and a tattoo of a snake on his neck. He was last seen wearing a blue jumpsuit and a black leather jacket. Anyone who sees him should call 911 immediately and do not approach him. I shrugged and changed the station. I didn't care about some criminal on the loose. I just wanted to get home and sleep. I checked the time on the dashboard. It was almost midnight. I yawned and rubbed my eyes. Suddenly, I saw something in the rearview mirror. It was a motorcycle speeding up behind me. It had no lights on, and it was getting closer and closer. I felt a surge of adrenaline and gripped the steering wheel. Who was this guy? Was he trying to run me off the road? I stepped on the gas and tried to lose him, but he was faster and more agile. He swerved around the other cars and kept tailing me. I looked at the mirror again and saw his face. He was wearing a black helmet with a dark visor, but I could see his eyes. They were cold and cruel, and they stared right at me. He was the convict. I recognized the tattoo on his neck. He had somehow gotten a motorcycle and was now chasing me. Why me? What did he want from me? I panicked and looked for a way out. There was a gas station up ahead. Maybe I could pull over there and get some help. I turned on the blinker and slowed down, hoping he would pass me by. But he didn't. He followed me to the gas station and parked next to me. I got out of the car and ran to the store, hoping to find someone inside. But the store was closed. The lights were off and the door was locked. I banged on the glass and shouted for help, but no one answered. I was alone. I turned around and saw him walking towards me. He had a knife in his hand and he was smiling. He said something, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of my heartbeat. He was only a few feet away from me. I had nowhere to run. He raised the knife and stabbed me in the chest. I felt a sharp pain and fell to the ground. He leaned over me and whispered in my ear, "Sorry, buddy. Wrong place, wrong time." He got back on his motorcycle and drove away, leaving me to die. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I felt blood pouring out of my wound and soaking my clothes. I felt cold and numb. I looked at the sky and saw the stars. They were so bright and beautiful. I wished I could see them again. I wished I could see my family and friends again. I wished I could live again. But it was too late. I closed my eyes and everything went black. I was driving home from a late-night party, feeling tired and sleepy. I had a few drinks, but not enough to impair my judgment. I just wanted to get to my bed and forget about the stressful week I had. The road was dark and deserted, with only the occasional car passing by. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, but the only station I could find was playing some creepy music and a voice that sounded like a distorted whisper. I quickly switched it off, feeling a chill down my spine. I decided to take a shortcut through a wooded area, hoping to save some time. I had driven this route before, and it was usually safe and quiet. But as I entered the forest, I noticed something strange. The trees seemed to close in on me, blocking out the moonlight. The air was cold and damp, and I could hear rustling noises in the bushes. I felt like I was being watched. I tried to ignore the feeling and focus on the road, but then I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road, wearing a long black cloak and a hood that covered its face. It was holding something in its hand, something that glinted in the headlights. A knife. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. I hit the figure with a loud thud and felt a jolt of pain in my chest. I looked at the windshield and saw blood splattered all over it. I screamed and opened the door to get out. But before I could, the figure grabbed me by the neck and pulled me back in. I felt the cold blade of the knife against my throat and heard a raspy voice in my ear. "Hello, my dear. I've been waiting for you." The last thing I saw was its face, a pale, rotting face with sunken eyes and a twisted smile. A face I recognized, a face that haunted my nightmares. It was my ex-husband, the one I killed a year ago. I struggled to free myself from his grip, but he was too strong. He laughed maniacally and pressed the knife harder against my skin. I felt a warm trickle of blood running down my neck. How are you alive?" I gasped, barely able to breathe. He leaned closer to me and I smelled his foul breath. He whispered in my ear, "I'm not alive, my dear. I'm undead, and so are you." I felt a surge of fear and confusion. What was he talking about? I was not undead. I was alive. I was human. He sensed my doubt and smiled wickedly. He said, "Don't you remember? The night I died, you died too. You stabbed me in the heart, and I stabbed you back. We both bled to death in each other's arms." I wondered how many others he had killed, and how many he had turned. I wondered if I was infected, and if I would become like him. I hoped not. I hoped I would survive. I hoped I would be okay. It was a cold and dark night. I was the victim, but I was also the survivor.